What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going to be going over the Stamina Warden Healer. So the Stamina Warden Healer is probably one of the more unique healing specs in the game, and there are many different ways that you can go about creating a Stamina Healer. Most of them, if not all of them, will revolve around using the Warden class, which is why we have the Warden here today, mainly because they are probably the best suited because they do have a healing class ability that uses stamina and scales off of stamina and weapon damage. So you will commonly see stamina warden healers being used. Now, there are a lot of weaknesses to running a stamina healer. It is possible to run very difficult content on a stamina warden healer, but you will be making a couple of cuts here and there in order to really make it work. And in general, stamina healers are more of a novelty rather than something that you will see commonly being used in endgame content. And we'll be going over why that is towards the end of this video when we discuss what makes a stamina healer unique compared to a Magicka healer. So this build video will be going over gear because, as you can imagine, a stamina healer can use different sets than a Magicka healer. You're not really constrained by sticking to only light armor sets. So we will be going over the different sets that you can run on a stamina healer, and from there, we will move on to skills, what sort of skills you're going to want to run as a stamina healer. And then we'll go over what sets the stamina healer apart from the Magicka healer, what sort of benefits they bring, as well as what drawbacks they have. And then we'll talk about the general philosophy behind healing as well. So let's go ahead and get started here first with gear. So we're going to start off with monster helm sets. Then we'll be talking about the different gear sets, starting off with trial sets, moving on to overland sets, which also include crafted sets. Then we'll go over a couple of dungeon sets, as well as some other sets that you might want to kind of keep in the back of your head as you, if you want to play a stamina healer. So, in terms of monster helm sets, Symphony of Blades still remains the set that you're going to want to run. So this is still, even as a stamina healer, going to be your best monster helm set, the best monster helm set you can run in an organized raid group. So this just returns a bunch of resources back. Doesn't really affect your direct healing in terms of the 2-piece. The 1-piece does add a little bit of additional healing done, which is why Symphony of Blades is still useful in the stamina healer, not just because of the stamina, not because of the resource return, but also because the 1-piece bonus is universally beneficial, regardless of whether you're using Magicka or the stamina healing ability. And it's really just there for the additional resource return that you can get by using it. In terms of other monster helm sets you can run here, for the most part, they're pretty much identical to what you would see on a Magicka healer here. So, for example, we still have Sentinel, so the 1-piece is healing done, so very similarly to Symphony, still pretty useful. It does restore Magicka and Stamina back, not a lot, so it's not quite as strong as it used to be, but it does benefit both Magicka and Stamina users, so it is still a okay set to run, but you will commonly see Symphony run rather than Sentinel Rkugamz. But for base game users, Rkugamz is probably going to be the best sort of catch-all option if you want to return some resources back, but you don't have access to Symphony of Blades. Moving on from there, Troll King is situationally useful. There are a couple of fights where Troll King will be beneficial because it does benefit your health regen, which is not affected by certain PvE defiles. So, for example, Baneful Mark and the Ice Prison in Laquestes in Sunspire. But it's very situationally useful. But I would still consider Troll King, picking up a set of Troll King just for those few situations where it might end up being beneficial. Earthgore is kind of okay. It's not really a set that I would necessarily go out of my way to farm for. It's just a really large burst heal every 35 seconds. It's that 35 seconds that really sort of draws Earthgore back a lot. It scales down its effectiveness by a really significant margin here, along with the fact that it only heals one person. So while it is a very bursty heal, it only heals one person, so not particularly useful overall. And then we have Bogdan. The 1-piece is max Magicka, so it doesn't impact your stamina heals, but it does impact your Magicka heals, and we do have some of those just because we do want to maintain overall group support. So we do have a couple of Magicka healing abilities, so it's still pretty beneficial just to have the additional max Magicka there. And in terms of raw healing potential, Bogdan definitely is the winner here when it comes to monster helm sets, because it is an AoE heal, and the heal that you do get out of it is particularly strong. So definitely a strong set if you're just looking for raw healing done. And that's pretty much it for Monster Helm sets here. But Symphony of Blades is definitely going to be the strongest option. So just keep in mind that Symphony of Blades does require you to have the Ratstone DLC because it does come from Depths of Malatar. Now, in terms of other sets here, we'll talk about what I'm wearing first, and then we'll go over the different sets that you can run. So for our body, we're running Powerful Assault. Because we're a stamina healer and our primary resource is stamina, we are able to use Powerful Assault, which does give a unique bonus. So this does stack with things like Major Courage and Minor Courage. It's a little bit tricky to use because you do have to cast an Assault ability, and the people that get the bonus, it is dependent on proximity as well as overall max stamina. So you will need to be very aware of the kind of how Powerful Assault works. Nephis has made a pretty good video about how Powerful Assault works, which should be popping up right now. So if you kind of want to know the intricacies behind how you can apply the Powerful Assault buff, I recommend checking out Nephis's video. But because this is a medium armor set, you won't really find this being used too often on a Magicka healer, and even on tanks, where you can run it as a front bar set, as a jewelry and weapon set, you don't really see it being used too often. So a stamina healer is able to run this set with pretty good effectiveness overall. The other set we're running is going to be Olorime. So this is a light armor set, so if you want to maintain that stamina sort of healer identity with the medium armor as your body set, you will need to run jewelry and weapons here. Now, I do have jewelry, and I do have Triune jewelry because we do want to kind of balance out our traits, because we still have some Magicka abilities we want to maintain just to, make sure we have good group support still. And then we have the Olorime's bow as our back bar. This should actually be changed to a different traits. We'll go over that in a little bit. But then for our front bar, we're still going with a Restoration Staff because we still want to have that Comet Prayer bonus for the Minor Berserk. Don't really want to give that up. So we will need to run a Restoration Staff, and the best Restoration Staff right now in the game, in my opinion, is going to be the Master's Restoration Staff because it does give back Magicka and Stamina back when you use Illustrious Springs, or Illustrious Healing or Healing Springs. So you will want to maintain that Master's Restoration Staff here on the front bar just because you do want to give back a little bit more resources with the Grand Rejuvenation effect there. Now, really quickly, I am going to transmute my bow here to the appropriate trait. But before we go over other sets, I do want to talk about traits and enchants here. So you can see here my bow is going to be infused with a shock damage enchant. The shock damage enchant will help proc concuss, which is a requirement for off balance. You will not be running a lightning staff, so you will not be providing that off balance, but you will be able to help out with off balance uptime by making sure you have that shock damage glyph there. Infused will basically ensure that it is proccing more often, and you will be using Endless Hail in order to proc it. For our front bar, we're going with Charged because Charged does impact the shock damage glyph on the back bar while you're on your front bar. So Infused will basically allow it to proc more often, and then when you're on your front bar here, Charged will basically give you a higher probability of applying that concussed uptime, so that way you have better minor vulnerability uptime, as well as better concussed uptime for better off-balance uptime. But you do have a couple of options for front bar traits, so you can go with Infused if you'd like, or Defensive, or Powered, or Nirnhone. All these traits have their different uses here. And same thing with enchants, a couple of options. I like Weapon Damage Enchant, just for stronger heals overall. But you can run something like an Absorb Magicka, Absorb Stamina glyph if you need additional sustain. You can run a Weakening glyph in order to help reduce damage incoming to the group, and so on. So you do have a few options here with front bar traits and enchants, but your back bar is usually going to be infused with a shock damage enchant. For jewelry, I already talked about running Triune here because we do want to balance out Stamina and Magicka. So the only real good jewelry trait for that is going to be Triune. Now you can split up Robust and Arcane if you prefer to go that route there. So you can do something like 2 Robust, 1 Arcane, 2 Arcane, 1 Robust to kind of balance out your traits that way. But Triune is generally speaking going to be kind of the most well balanced because it also provides some additional health as well. For enchants, go with a kind of combination between weapon damage and spell damage. We are splitting our traits a little bit. We are focusing more on stamina and weapon damage, but you still want to have good max Magicka and spell damage because of Comet Prayer and Healing Orbs. Those two abilities do scale off of your spell damage and max Magicka, so we do want to have respectable levels of spell damage and max Magicka bonuses here. Now, the downside is you will be giving up some regen in order to do so. So if you notice the regen that we have right now, we're not breaking 1,000 on either of them, but we do have fairly decent spell and weapon damage before we have all of our buffs active. So that is something you want to keep in mind. So just definitely Keep in mind your regen. You do have a Resto staff to help get some Magicka back, and you have a bow and a back bar to get some stamina back. So don't be afraid to heavy attack in order to get your overall sustain going. Now for traits and enchants on our armor, you have a couple of options here. So you definitely want divines on your small pieces with max stamina enchants like I have here. For your large pieces, you have two options. So you can either go Infused or Divines. Doesn't really matter which one you choose. If you go with Infused, I recommend going with a Prismatic enchant to kind of help get both max stamina and max magicka. But you can go with max stamina instead to help boost your stamina heals, which should be a little bit stronger just because we're going to have a little bit better weapon damage overall. So you can see here that I do kind of have it split here. So for example, I have a Divine's Jack with max stamina enchant, but I have an Infused Helm with a Prismatic enchant. So you can kind of split it up however you'd like, whatever best fits what you want to do as a healer. Now, in terms of other sets to run, we're going to start off with trial sets and then move on to other sets here. Not much in terms of light trial sets. We are a stamina healer, so we do want to focus in on mostly stamina sets here. The only set that I will mention here, besides Olorime, would probably be Infallible Mage. Now, as a Warden, you do have access to a minor vulnerability already through Fetter Infection or Growing Swarm, so not really particularly useful, but if you want to pick it up, you can, but it's really kind of getting phased out in endgame healing. For medium armor trial sets, not that many because most of these are focused in on DPS, but I do want to point out, where did it go? I want to point out War Machine, which might be useful as a Warden because you do have a relatively low cost ultimate with your Tree's ultimate, which costs 90 ultimate. But generally speaking, Warhorn's can provide more DPS, so you won't really be using War Machine if at all. You might use it in 4-man content, but even there, Warhorn is going to be more beneficial to overall group DPS. But I do want to point out War Machine here in case you do want to use this in conjunction with your Tree's ultimate rather than running Warhorn. Not a lot of good trial sets here for a stamina healer. Now, in terms of overland sets, there is one that I want to mention here. It's a light set, so you will need to get this on jewelry and weapons. Now, if you are going to run this set, you will want to run it on both bars, so you will not be able to run the Master's Restoration Staff if you run this set. Way of Martial Knowledge. So your stamina needs to be below 50%. So this is a big kind of caveat here with Martial Knowledge. You do need to make do a very good job at maintaining your stamina. Now, we are a stamina healer, so we might not want to get our stamina down below 50% in order to maintain Martial Knowledge, just because we need to use it in order to heal people. Now, the good thing with this particular build is we're trying to split up between stamina and magicka, but most of our heals will be coming from stamina-based heals. So we might not want to use Martial Knowledge as a stamina healer just because of that restriction of keeping our stamina below 50% health. But it is a set that I did want to point out here because this is becoming very common in endgame trials groups for the additional damage taken debuff. But that's pretty much it for light overland sets. Now, in terms of medium overland sets, not many sets that you can really run. So a lot of these sets, again, medium armor sets, generally speaking, are more focused in on doing DPS, so not many good overland medium sets. The only one that you might want to pick up would be Hide of the Werewolf, which basically gets you some additional ultimate, so you can get more Warhorns going out. But it's not very strong, and it's not really a set that provides a large amount of group utility compared to some of the other sets that we are going to go over. So not really all that good, and again, a lot of these sets here are focused more on doing damage than actually providing any sort of additional group utility. So we're passing on a lot of these medium sets here. Now, for crafted sets, not that many. Again, a lot of stamina sets are geared more towards damage, not really for group utility. The only one that might end up being somewhat useful would be, I don't think it's actually here. Yeah, this is not updated. Actually, yes, here it is Torug's Pact, which is a crafted set, three trait crafted set in the base game, and it basically increases the potency of your enchants. So your weapon damage glyph, your shock glyph will be stronger, and it has a lower cooldown. So that might be beneficial, especially if you're running the Crusher enchant. But you might not necessarily have to run this. You might see this being run on a tank instead, just because the bonuses are more beneficial to tanks compared to a healer. but it's something I do want to keep in mind here. But that's really the only craft that you'd be able to run on a healer. Now in terms of dungeon sets, first start off with medium dungeon sets. There are actually a few dungeon sets here in the medium armor line which are going to be beneficial. First one is going to be Hircine's Veneer. This reduces the cost of all stamina abilities by 4% for everybody in the group. So really beneficial. Because it's a flat bonus, you will want to wear this on the body. And because it is medium armor, you can wear this on the body no problem at all. It's definitely a good set to pick up, especially if you have a stamina heavy DPS group. The other stamina set that I want to mention here, let me see if I can find it here, is going to be Scavenging Demise. Now again, as a Warden, you do have access to Fetter Infection or Growing Swarm, both of which provide minor vulnerability. But if you want to swap that ability out for some other group utility ability, then you can run Scavenging Demise or Double Aether, like I mentioned earlier, in place of Growing Swarm or Fetter Infection to get that minor vulnerability still. Now, the downside of running Scavenging Demise is you need a way to get poison damage into your build, so you probably will have to run something like Poison Injection in order to get that critical poison damage, because it does proc off of critical poison damage. So just bear that in mind if you do want to run Scavenging Demise. You will have to change up your bars a little bit here in order to make use of this set. But that is probably the only couple of meter armor sets you might want to run. In terms of light dungeon sets, there are a few. And again, you will want to wear these jewelry and weapons. The first one's going to be Sanctuary, which boosts healing received by everybody within 10 meters of you. Situationally useful, pretty much only used when you need to heal through a debuff. So for example, the Ice Prisons in Laquestes, Baneful Mark, and Cloud Rest. Generally speaking, you will not be running this in any other situations outside of those defiles. So while it is potentially useful, it's not really something I'd recommend picking up. It is a flat bonus too, so you would have to wear this on both bars, so you would be giving up the Massive Restoration Staff. Too much sacrifice for not enough gain, in my opinion, for running Sanctuary. The other set's going to be Worm's Raiment, which is basically the Magicka version of Hircine's Veneer, so this reduces the cost of magic abilities by 4%. Again, flat bonus, so you will want to wear it on both bars, which basically means you can't run the Master's Restoration Staff. So again, you're giving up a little bit in order to run Worm's Raiment. So definitely not something I'd recommend running. So at least on a stamina healer, you might want to just push this onto your either an off tank or on a Magicka healer in order to get the benefits of Worm's Raiment. But it is a set that I did want to bring here to your attention in case you want to run something like Hircine's and Worm on a stamina healer. It'll look a little weird, but it is certainly possible to do that. You have Jorvuld's Guidance, which is another light armor set, but you can wear this on the back bar only, just to boost your major force uptime from aggressive Warhorn. But it is a light armor set, so again, jewelry, weapons. But unlike Worm and Sanctuary, you can run Master Restoration Staff with this, because you can just use this on the back bar to boost your major force uptime from Warhorn. And then Hollow's Fang's Thirst, if you have a lot of Magicka DPS in your group, in order to get the Magicka going, so you return Magicka back to your group here. You can wear this on the back bar, but it's not very useful on the back bar. It's more beneficial to run this on both bars, so again, you'd be giving up the Master Restoration Staff, so it might be more beneficial to ask a Magicka healer to run the set instead. And that pretty much covers all the different sets that you can run as a stamina healer. You'll find most of them down in the description below. I think I actually do list all of them in the description below if you guys want to check out which sets that I covered here. Now in terms of character sheets, it's a little bit difficult to fully recommend going with a Breton here because, again, Bretons are more Magicka based. You get max Magicka and cost reduction to your Magicka abilities, but no really benefit to your stamina, so wouldn't really recommend running Bretons here. Dark Elves are a pretty good option because you do get both Magicka and stamina. Max stamina and Magicka, you get 1875, and then you get also 258 spell and weapon damage, so really good for this sort of stamina slash Magicka hybrid healer. But you can also run something like Orcs for the max stamina and weapon damage. You can run Redguards or Bosmer for the 2000 max stamina, as well as the different sort of sustain bonuses that they might have. The sustain races here, like Redguards and Bosmer, might actually be better off because you do happen to get a little bit more resources back, which is one of the biggest weaknesses of running a stamina healer. You will basically need to split between Magicka and stamina regen, so it might be beneficial to run like a Red Guard or a Boss Burn in order to get some more stamina regen, so you can focus more on getting some Magicka regen up. Or if you have access to the Imperial Edition, you can also run an Imperial, so that way you get the max stamina bonus, but you get the additional resource return for all three stats, 333 every couple of seconds. Plus you get across the board cost reduction, 3% cost reduction, so that might help out your sustain a little bit more. So you have a few options when it comes to races. Now for attributes, I'm splitting it 32-32. Stamina Magicka is going to vary depending on your race. So for example, as a Dark Elf, I get both max stamina and max Magicka. But generally speaking, you are going to want to focus a little bit more on max stamina compared to max Magicka here. And that does come with things like, your enchants and your weapon armor bonuses. But if you wanted to dump more points into stamina, you can do so. You'll be giving up some Magicka. Just keep that in mind. If you do decide to bump up your stamina a little bit more, you're going to be giving up some Magicka, and so your combat prayer is not going to be as effective, and your orbs aren't going to be effective in terms of raw healing. The good thing is we're not really running combat prayer or orbs for the heal. We're really running it for the utility that they provide, so it might be beneficial to actually give up some Magicka so you can focus in more on stamina. In terms of Mundstone, the Thief is probably going to be your best bet here because it does boost your DPS as well as your critical heals, the amount of times you can crit. So it does benefit both your spell, your Magicka, and stamina heals. But if you want to focus more on sustain, you can run either the Atronach for Magicka regen, or I believe it's the Serpent for stamina regen. If you want to go that route, you can go Apprentice or Warrior for spell damage or weapon damage, respectively. So you do have a couple of options, but the Thief is probably going to be the best in terms of balancing out both your Magicka and stamina-based heals. We're a Vampire for the 10% additional Magicka and stamina regen. Again, regen is one of the biggest weaknesses for stamina-based healers, so we do want to kind of get a little bit more out of our sustain. Just keep in mind that if you are a Vampire, you will take more fire damage, so you will want to kind of adjust for that. You might want to bring your Vampirism stage up to stage 2 rather than stage 4 to reduce the penalty that you get from fire damage. Now for food, a lot of different options here. I'm running the Witch Sugar Skull so that we get the health, stamina, and Magicka. But by running this food, we will be giving up some stamina and Magicka regen. There is one food that gives you max health and Magicka and stamina regen. That's Jewels of Misrule. But by using that food, you're going to be giving up max stamina and max Magicka. So your heals will end up being weaker, but you will get more regen out of it. You can also run something like Artaeum Takeaway Broth, which gives you your stamina regen, max stamina and max health, but then you're giving up your max Magicka and Magicka regen, so there's really no great food. So just kind of pick whichever food out of those sort of options that I just gave, depending on what you need most for just raw healing potential. Which Sugar Skulls might be the best option. If you want to focus in on stamina heals and stamina regen, you might want to run Artaeum Takeaway Broth or Dubious Commortan Throne. If you just want to run just raw regen and you can make up for that loss in max stats through, for example, maybe getting some more weapon or spell damage, and you can run Jewels of Misrule to max out your regen on both Magicka and stamina heals. They have a lot of options here when it comes to food, and that's just because of the kind of hybridized nature of this build. Moving on to skills. For our front bar, this is the Restoration Staff bar. We're running Soothing Spores. Combat Prayer for the Minor Berserk. We're not really using this as a burst heal. This is more to maintain that Minor Berserk buff, which is very powerful, and we still want to have that going. Illustrious Healing for the Master's Restoration Staff bonus. If you're not running the Master Restoration Staff, you can drop this ability. Echoing Vigor for our stamina heal. Energy Orb for the heal as well as the combustion synergy. We still want to give back resources with the combustion synergy. Then for our ultimate, we have Enchanted Forest, but you can run a couple of other different ultimates if you prefer. For our front bar, or I should say our back bar, we have Ring of Preservation for the heal and minor protection. Then we have Razor Caltrops. This helps proc Powerful Assault. Plus, it also is an AoE Major Fracture, which might be beneficial for if you have a lot of stamina DPS in a group, for example. Endless Hail to help proc our enchants. Bull Netch for the additional stamina return that we get from it. It also provides Major Brutality, Major Sorcery. So that way we can focus in on using, for example, just Weapon Power Potions for stamina return, and we don't have to necessarily worry about losing out on our Magicka Major Sorcery. And then we have Growing Swarm for the minor vulnerability that it provides here. You can also go with Fetter Infection if you prefer, so that way you can use Magicka rather than stamina, but because we are using both here, you do want to kind of pick whichever one you will best suit your sustain. Then, of course, we have Aggressive Warhorn. Now, not many flex options here. A lot of these abilities you do want to maintain here, so pretty much everything on the front bar except for Illustrious Healing. If you're not running the Master's Restoration staff, you will want to have. Now, in terms of front bar, if you want, you can run Wild Guardian or Eternal Guardian here for the additional regen that you'd get with the Flourish passive. If you want just straight up raw Magicka Regen through the Magicka 8 passive, you can run Reviving Barrier. It also does provide a shield and a heal, so it's potentially useful. You will want to have on hand Efficient Purge for those instances where you're going to need to purge negative effects from your allies. Hopefully you have a Magicka healer that'll be able to do this, or a Magicka DPS that'll be able to do this, because your Magicka pools are not going to be quite as high as theirs. So it is going to be a little bit tricky to sustain this if you need to run this multiple times, for example. Under the green balance line, you might want to run Green Lotus, so that way your light attacks will restore some health. Bows do have the fastest light attack, so the time between light attacks when bows are a little bit faster compared to like on a restoration staff. So it might be beneficial to run this ability, but generally speaking, I don't really find it very useful because the heal is pretty small. So not really something I would recommend running on a stamina healer, but you can still run it. Then if you want to provide some additional synergies, you can run either Corrupting Pollen or Budding Seeds. These do scale off of Magicka rather than stamina, so they're not going to be quite as strong as compared to, for example, Soothing Spores. But it is another potential heal that you can run, and it's a unique synergy, so that helps with Lacassi's uptime and Alkosh uptimes on your stamina DPS and tanks, respectively. But beyond that, not too many options. Expensive Frost Cloak to help give major resolve to everybody in the group, so that's really useful for overall group survivability. You can run Subterranean Assault for AoE Major Fracture if you don't want to run Caltrops. If you're, for example, not running Powerful Assault, you don't need to run Caltrops, but I would still recommend picking that up still. And you can also run Cutting Dive to help with off-balance uptime if you're more than 7 meters away from the target. It also does help a little bit with DPS as well, so you can certainly run Cutting Dive if you'd like. Not much restoration staff-wise. You can run Healing Ward or Radiant Regeneration. Not quite as strong because they do scale off of Magicka, but still potentially useful nonetheless. In terms of survivability, you have a light armor shield with Harness Magic and Dampen Magic, but you're not going to be using this obviously unless you have 5 light armor pieces. So let's say you're running Worm, for example, on your body, you could potentially run this, but generally speaking, you will have stamina, medium armor on your body, so instead you will be probably running something like Elude or Shuffle for the major evasion to help with overall survivability. So that's generally speaking going to be what you should be running if you need some more survivability. You could also instead run Bone Surge under the Undaunted line for a shield. The synergy also provides group shield as well. Now it does scale off of their max health, so it's usually not going to be particularly strong, but it is potentially useful. It also does grant Major Vitality, which can be beneficial to help out your healing potential. Definitely don't skip out on Overflowing Altar for the Mana Lifesteal. Definitely very useful. It also provides the Blood Feast synergy, which is very nice in certain scenarios. Then you also want to pay attention to having Shadow Soak for the Black Widow synergy. Not very strong compared to how it has been in previous patches, but still it's free damage and it does provide a synergy for Lacassi's uptime for your stamina DPS. And that's pretty much it when it comes to abilities. So not much flexibility here when it comes to skills, but you do have a couple of options depending on your specific setups. Now for your champion points, CBs are going to be fairly similar compared to a Magicka healer, with the exception obviously that you will need to put a couple more points into Mooncalf as well. So here, I do recommend dropping Arcanus down to 64 and then bumping Mooncalf up if you can. So you will eventually have to take some points out of Warlord and the other nodes, so you can drop all these down 23 if you like. Bump Mooncalf up a little bit. So obviously you're going to want to try to hit 64 if you can, so you can drop them down to 21 if you'd like. You will end up jumping over a jump point. This way you get both the Arcanist and Mooncalf 13% Magicka and Stamina regen. 75 in Tenacity still, just because you do want to get some more resource return when you heavy attack. And for your blue CPs, it's going to be a pretty even split here because you will obviously have both magic and stamina heal, so you will want to go 81 precise strikes, 81 Elfborn like so, and then something like 75 into blessed. And then, depending on whether you want to maximize healing, you can bump it all the way up to 100 and put the 8 points wherever you'd like. If you want to do a little bit more DPS, you can keep blessed at 75 and then do something like put some into piercing or mighty or thaumaturge. It's kind of up to you how you want to go about doing that. And then for your red CPs, going for the balanced approach as we always do: 81 Ironclad, 61 Thick Skin, 64 in a Hardy, and Elemental Defender. So that's all the build information. Now let's talk about what sets a stamina healer apart. So obviously, one of the big advantages of running a stamina healer is you have the potential to do a little bit more DPS here. Now, not a lot of DPS, but you can do some more DPS with the bow on the back bar here. You're not really losing out on the DPS side of things. You do, technically speaking, have a little bit higher weapon damage compared to spell damage on a Magicka healer, but generally speaking, DPS potential is going to be very similar between Magicka and stamina healers. One of the main benefits of running a stamina healer is you're able to run Hircines and Powerful Assault without really needing to flex your things around too much, because you can just run them on your armor bonuses there, your armor sets. So that is one of the big advantages of running a stamina healer. Now, one of the weaknesses, and this is a pretty glaring weakness, is the fact that a lot of the buff moves use Magicka. Common Prayer, Illustrious Healing, if you're running the Master Restoration Staff, Energy Orb, these all obviously use Magicka. And these are all important buffs you want to have on hand. Illustrious Healing, mainly for the Master Restoration Staff bonus, Common Prayer for the Minor Berserk, and Orbs for the Combustion Synergy. And so dropping any of these does reduce your overall group effectiveness in terms of the amount of utility you're able to provide for the group. That's not really something you want to have in a raid scenario. So if, for example, you can, if you'd like, just completely max out on just stamina heals. You can certainly do that if you'd like. So you can run something like Circle of Protection on the front bar. You can run something like Green Lotus. You can run Overflowing Altar in place of any of these abilities here. The downside is you're going to have less group utility, and you're pushing more of it onto your second healer, your Magicka healer. So that's a little bit unfair. So that's kind of why this is a little bit of a hybridized build, and this is one of the big weaknesses of stamina healing builds, is that despite the fact that we do want to focus on stamina because we have Soothing Spores and Echoing Vigor and Ring of Preservation as our main healing abilities, we do need to still have Magicka in order to maintain good uptimes on Common Prayer and Energy Orbs. Now, with the 1 orb and 1 healing springs out at a time, it does help out our sustain compared to previous patches where you had to spam orbs in order to be effective. But it's still a little bit challenging to maintain good uptimes on these because of our, generally speaking, lower Magicka compared to a Magicka healer. So that's one of the big weaknesses of a stamina healer, and that's one of the reasons why you won't really see them being used too often in endgame groups. The downsides of having to work harder to maintain the same group utility is what draws healers away from stamina healers, because it's so much more difficult, because it's so much more work in order to maintain these very important group utility buffs. That being said, stamina healers are definitely still able to do all the content in the game. You just will have to work a little bit harder. A lot of your heals are going to be focused more on healing over time. So Echoing Vigor is a heal over time. Ring of Preservation is a heal over time. Obviously, Energy Orb, despite the fact that it does scale off of Magicka, it's still a really good heal. So if you just take a look at it, it does 664 healing every half second, so a little bit over 1300 healing done per second, so it's still pretty respectable. And Illustrious Healing is still not bad either, so 1200 health every second before we have all of our buffs active. So overall, not terrible, but our healing is going to be focused in more on healing over time abilities. We do have a burst heal with Soothing Spores. It's not particularly strong, and you do get 15% more out of that 6k, so you do get an additional roughly 1k more, so it's closer to about a 7.5k burst heal. Without any buffs, so with buffs active, you will have stronger burst heals. But because of the kind of split nature of Magicka and Stamina here, you will have to rely very heavily on maintaining your heal over times in order to layer them on top of each other in order to keep everybody alive. Unfortunately, I don't know of any endgame, sort of like competitive endgame players that run stamina healing. I personally don't run a stamina healer, even for fun. You might be able to find maybe an endgame healer, potentially running a stamina healer just for fun, kind of a relaxed casual raid night, for example. But for the most part, a lot of endgame raiders are running more Magicka healers. That being said, though, I still have down in the description below the Twitch links and YouTube channels for a couple of endgame healers who are going to be in a better position to answer any questions you might have concerning stamina healing. Again, stamina healing is not something that you really see in endgame healing, but the basic concepts behind healing still kind of remain the same between magic and stamina healers, so you can kind of get their opinions on how to run an effective stamina healer because they are more experienced with healing in general compared to me. But that concludes this build video. If you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, or you can follow the links in the description to the Twitch or YouTube channels for those endgame healers there. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.